Hello, do you guys ever feel like your colouring pages look flat and lifeless and just do not look as good as the ones that you see on YouTube channels and Instagram? Over the past year, I've picked up some really super simple tips and tricks that will totally level up your colouring pages. So today, I'm going to share with you some of the tricks and tips that I've learnt, and honestly, you will be surprised how easy they are and how much of a difference they will make. My first tip is to apply a base coat to your pages. Now, I do this with quite a few things. I do this with NEOCOLORs, with watercolours, with ink tints, but I usually first reach for my water-based markers. So these Ohuhu water-based markers here. So I will usually use these ones or my alcohol markers. Obviously, alcohol markers are a little bit better because they don't leave the streaks, but they are going to go through to the back of the page. So they're only going to work if you have one-sided pages. Now, the water-based markers will leave streaks, but because it is just a base coat and you are planning on going over the top of it, it doesn't really matter. And I don't think once the pencil's over the top, you can't usually see those streaks anyway. Putting down a base coat before you add your pencils helps eliminate those tiny little white spots of the paper that show through when you're using your pencil. It fills up a large space quickly, and it also eliminates the need to do 10,000 layers of pencil on top to get that more vibrant colour that you're after. So as you can see here, I've started to do my base coat, which is in just this Ohuhu alcohol marker. So I've just done a base coat of grey, and then when I put my pencil over the top, which will also be a grey, because this is already underneath, it's got the positives of no white showing through, and then also giving it an extra layer of colour, which makes that colour that you actually use after that more vibrant. When choosing what colour to base your pages with, I recommend to go with a lighter colour, so more of a pastel colour. I actually got the Ohuhu pastel alcohol markers just for this reason. If you use a lighter colour, it gives you more options to build colour on top of it. So you can really go from this and you can build quite a few layers on top and build some shadows and highlights. Sometimes you can use this base coat as your highlight so you don't have to put a lighter colour on top, which sometimes is a really good idea because it gives a really nice crisp highlight. So just so you can see what it's like when it's actually finished, I've based this whole thing in alcohol marker, as you can see here. So I based the whole thing in a blue. I also based these otters in a really light colour as well. And then over the top, I just used my pencil to define the shadows and the depth in the colour. So if you can see here, I also put this creamy colour. So you can see it's blue there. So I also put this creamy colour over the blue. So you can add other colours over the top to give it more depth as well. So this is a really good example to show what you can do with the base coat. And you can see there's little spaces here, like this here. I have just left that as a lighter colour. I haven't put anything over the top of this. And you can see where I have put the pencil. So just add some more depth. This was my first real aha moment when I started colouring. I had never heard of blender pencils before and was completely shook when I saw what they could actually do. I always looked through Instagram and saw those pictures that were coloured in pencil but looked a smoother marker, and I could never figure out what it was. And this is it. I think this is the answer, using a blender pencil. So with the blender pencils, there are two types. There's one like this, which is a waxed-based blender pencil. So this is the Prismacolor one. And there's also oil-based blender pencils as well, like the Caran d'Ache one is a really popular one that lots of people use. So I don't have an oil-based one because I primarily colour with Prismacolors, which is wax. And my rule I stick to is that if your pencil is wax, use a wax type blender pencil, and if your pencils are oil, use an oil blender pencil. What makes these pencils different from other pencils are they are actually made up of the wax or oil but colourless. So they're designed to smooth out and blend coloured pencil. So the way they actually work is they soften and spread out the pigment, and that in turn fills in all the paper texture. It also smooths out all your pencil strokes and makes them a lot less visible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to colour in here. I'm just going to colour in a little bit of this here. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to use a blender pencil on half, but not on the other half. And just so we can see how it actually works. So I've zoomed you in really close, and I hope you can see the grain that's just coming through the paper. So you can see the little bits of white coming through the paper. When I'm using a blender pencil, I do press quite hard, and I will start from the lighter colour blending into the darker colour. What you do have to remember about a blender pencil is they do pick up the colour. But if you can see just on the edge here that it has picked up that colour. So if you're going from the dark into the lighter colour, it's going to take that colour into it. As you can see, it's really smushing in that colour into the paper, and you can't see any of that grain anymore. You'll see here that it has definitely smoothed out and filled in all these little holes that you can see over this side. It also makes your gradients blend a lot better. And I also noticed that the colour is a lot more vibrant as well. So it takes away all those strokes, and because you can't see the little white bits, it makes that colour a lot more deeper. To be honest, I use a blender pencil a lot, and I will even use a blender pencil sometimes if I want more intense colour after I have put a base coat down as well. So they're super handy. My little favourite tool I've got, but just remember that that colour does get stuck on here, and you need to clean your blender pencil before you start on a different colour. My next tip is to cover up those black lines. I used to see finished colouring pages and they looked like paintings, and I couldn't figure out why. After studying them, I realised that it's because I couldn't see any black lines. So I found that covering up the black lines in your paintings makes it look a lot more like a painting. So it gives it that painterly effect. I achieve this look by using acrylic markers or fine liners usually. So I've got a lot of different types of acrylic markers and a lot of different fine liners, but I will show you which ones are my favourites. So my favourite fine liner are jelly rolls. I find that they will go over pencil really nice. They just are really smooth. You don't need to stop and start, and they really rarely get clogged up. And then with the acrylic markers, I use the Art acrylic markers. I love these, and I have 2 packs. I have the dual colours, and I also have the pastel colours. So I find the pastels come in handy for doing the highlights, and then the dual colours come in handy for doing the other bits. The only thing I will say about these is you do have to take the tips out and wash them. If you don't, they do clog up. I don't do it every single time. I will colour in for a little bit, use it again, and then once it clogs up, then I'll take it out, wash it and pop it back in. It's super simple and it's not hard to do. But you can see here that I have covered up most of the lines in this page. The only lines I haven't covered up are these ones here, and that's basically just because I've forgotten about it. So I might do them now. So it's super easy to do. It's just covering the lines. Basically what you have to do is just make sure that your fine liner or acrylic marker is basically the same size as the line. So you want the nib to be the same size. So if it's a big line, you would want to use your acrylic markers. And if it's a small line like this one, a delicate line, you would want to use your gel pen with the smaller nib. And you will find that some pens that you try won't cover up those black lines. So you will just have to hunt around, see which ones work, but these jelly rolls definitely cover up the lines without any problem. So you can see what a big difference it is when everything's covered up. So you can see on this one where I've coloured most of it in and then covered most of the black lines. I've left some of the black lines in, like these in the castle, because I wanted to define the castle a little bit more, but mostly everything except the black lines in these flowers are covered up. Sometimes you can take ages on a page, but at the end it can just look completely flat. We always concentrate on colouring shadows to add depth, but we often forget to add the highlights until the very end. And that's fine because they can always be added in with white gel pens or Posca pens. My favourite pens to use for highlights is once again the Jelly Roll. I really like this Signo Uniball white pen. It's got a really deep colour and it rolls on really, really well. And then, of course, we've got our white Poscas, and I've got them in quite a few different sizes. By adding highlights with your white markers, you can easily create the look of shiny surfaces, water droplets, glossy lips, and most important is sparkly eyes. So you can see here, it's not much. I haven't done much, but it does make a difference. So just here, I've added a little highlight in here, just a few here, just to make this look more like glass. And also a few up here with the top of the gem is as well. By using these, it's going to give your page more dimension. So it's going to make them look a little bit more 3D than 2D. A colour palette can make or break your colouring pages. When you stick to a planned colour palette, you can create an overall mood for your page that prevents your page looking like super chaotic and mismatched. For example, when choosing like warm and earthy tones, you can kind of create a cozy vintage look. But then when you want a really nice, fun, vibrant, summery feel, you would go for more of a bright, bold colour. I always have a colour palette in mind when colouring a page, and if I don't, it ends up a disaster. I will show you. This one here, I did not have a colour palette in mind, and I just went crazy, and I haven't finished it because I don't know how to fix it. But that's a pure example of just chucking everything at your page and hoping it works, but that failed. So I've always been pretty good at knowing what colours go together and what looks nice. And I actually am a photographer, so I spend a lot of time organising outfits for families and making things look coordinated but not matchy-matchy. And I think that's why choosing colour palettes for me isn't too hard. But I do use two ways of doing it when I find I'm getting a little bit lost. So I really like looking at Pinterest and also Instagram to get inspiration. But I do think that Pinterest is the best. You just scan through and look at other colorists' works. Just look at what colour schemes they've used. My best tip is don't use another colorist's colour scheme for exactly the same page. So I know that doesn't make sense, but for example, if I'm colouring this page in, I'm not going to look through Pinterest and find another colorist that's done this page and use their colour scheme, because that's going to just take all your input out of it. So it's not going to really feel like it's very artistic and challenging for yourself. So I think the best way to do it is to look at another page and say, I like that colour scheme, and then integrate that colour scheme into the page that you're doing. Another thing that you can do on Pinterest is also look at actual colour schemes. So if you type in colour schemes, they will come up with heaps of different schemes that you can look at. That's my first way of doing it. The other way I like to choose my colour schemes is by using a colour wheel. So I've just got this little one here. I've had this one for years. I know you can buy them in lots of places. You can buy them in Amazon. You can buy them in different art shops. This one's really good because it's got the two sides. and you can do lots of things with it and move it around. So there's 3 basic ways you can use a colour wheel. The first and most basic way is to use complementary colours. So complementary colours are the colours that are opposite each other. So for example, you'd be using red and green. So it's just the ones that are opposite each other. There's also an analog colour theory. So that means you're using colours that are next to each other on the colour wheel. And then the third way, which is also a little bit tricky, is the triadic colour scheme. And that is the ones that are in a triangle. So if you drew a triangle in that colour wheel, the 3 corners of that triangle are the colours that you would use. With this picture here, I've used the complementary colour scheme. So you can see I've used the green and the red. So most of it is green and red, and it doesn't hurt your eyes. It's quite pleasing to look at. And this, I always do feel that the red and green always do work well together. So this one here is kind of worked around an analog colour scheme. So it's more the blue, the purple and the pink that are the main colours in here. And you can see on both pages that they do work really nicely together. I actually have heaps of different ways to find colour schemes, and I might do a video on that. I have heaps of unconventional ways and ways that I've never seen people talk about before. So I might actually do a video on that for you guys at a later date, so we can just discuss and talk about where we can find colour schemes nice and easily. I have a lot more tips I will share with you in other videos, but these are my 5 absolute favourites. If you found any of these tips helpful, let me know in the comments below. And thanks so much for watching. And until next time, happy colouring.